Nancy.
Okay, I started recording. I'm letting them in.
Good,
Ready?
thank you.
Here they come.
Stampede.
Is that all of them?
No, they're still coming. There's 21 of them coming in.
All right, well, remember, you're my eyes and ears. So in
Yes,
case I miss
I
some
will
of
tell
those.
you about the hand.
Okay,
Yeah, good.
Hey, Jerry.
hey,
So I just do want to
we're
point
still
out
letting
that there,
people in.
that there are two screens, or at least in a lot of people's computers. Because of the number of people.
Yeah,
All right,
that's
they're
why,
all in, Jerry.
I'm sorry? All in?
They're all in.
Okay,
All in. 27.
who, Brian Curley,
So, Jerry, the select board authorized me to sort of present for the select board on.
okay, wait a minute, Mike, I haven't opened it yet.
That's fine.
Have I got assistant TA?
Hello.
Hi,
Hi, Carol. Are you here?
have I got the assistant TA?
No.
No, okay,
Jerry, I think she was just going to listen tonight. I don't think she felt comfortable commenting. I spoke to her earlier today.
yeah, I did too, and I just wanted to make sure that if in fact she was on, that I was going to introduce it to the board. Because I just had a
Okay.
No,
conversation
she's
with her
not
as
on
well.
yet.
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll open this meeting. Any announcements, open session, or public comment? From anybody? All right. For the general public, I have continued the meeting that we opened on the public hearing on petitioned article for the ADU from May 5th until tonight. But that article is second on the agenda. The first is the article that is submitted by the select board. So I think I heard Mike, the chairman of, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, is going to speak to that article. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Jerry,
Yes,
could you mention that people should put themselves on mute unless they're going to speak? Because we have a problem.
Yeah,
just-
whoever's on
Yeah.
0443 keeps showing up as speaking. I think that's the background noise.
That's me, and I'm, you know,
it's
not
somebody
making any
else.
noise.
No, it's somebody else in the background. It's probably not them.
So
Whoever, I think they,
is
I think
everybody's
Bonnie,
Oh.
I think Bonnie, they may have gotten you a hint, but if it continues, I will speak up again. So, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
what I'd like to do is the planning board did at length, and that public hearing is still open to the general public. I didn't close the public hearing aspect of that last petitioned article. So it's still open for comment from the public. What I would really like to do is, since we have taken this and it appears that that bylaw is for almost all intents and purposes identical, I would like you to, if you could, rather than go the whole thing, if you could get to the points that are different and why you did that.
Sure.
And I think that will help us. I'm certainly not going to shortcut you, but I would
I will
love to
keep
be
it
able to say,
under
okay,
4 minutes at the most, 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to just thank the planning board for the opportunity to present this bylaw from the select board. The bylaw, just for the general public to understand, has been recommended unanimously by the Housing Authority, the Local Housing Partnership, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the select board. I'm here presenting as the chair of the select board and a member of the Affordable Housing Trust, but this issue is also personal for me. I grew up in Wellfleet. I lived in Vermont for a brief time. I moved back here when my father was sick and he couldn't find housing, and we converted a 10 by 12 shed in my parents' yard into a place to live for a short time until we found a year-round place. We wound up living there in that uninsulated shed from May to October for about 4 years, moving back and forth from shed to winter rental with my girlfriend and a cat. We started our business in that shed, and eventually we found a year-round place, and it was an old 1970s by right ADU on a property on Cranberry Hollow. It was about 500 square feet and had a wood stove, and it was market rate, not capital A affordable, meaning that it was not income restricted. We paid $850 a month plus the labor to heat the place and splitting firewood. And the important thing was that it was not income restricted because we worked really hard and had a few consecutive good seasons growing oysters. And it led to the bank looking at us and lending us more money than we thought we could get to buy a house. And in the summer of 2019, just a couple of years ago, we were able to purchase a home in Wellfleet because of that. And we would not have been able to do that in an income restricted situation. And I think that's a really important point to make. And I'd just like to take a few minutes to discuss the reasons that the select board is sponsoring this bylaw and to respond to some of the concerns that the planning board have expressed in the previous meeting, because I did watch that and these bylaws are quite close. There are a few points that I'd like to make that I believe get to the heart of what this bylaw is and provide some context to its function within our already existing zoning bylaws and regulations. Firstly, it goes without saying we're in a housing crisis. There's no available rentals in Wellfleet. Affordable, not affordable, there's no rentals. You cannot find an ad for a rental. I know people living in illegal spaces, hot plates with families, mini fridges. That stuff's going on in town. It's how people get a foothold. It's how they remain here. And it's an issue, but it goes beyond that. The pandemic has accelerated and inflated the crisis in the market. People's year-round rentals are being sold, and that's happening too. So I've had several families that have been asked to move as their house is put on the market, and some of them shellfish families that actually can't leave the town of Wellfleet. So we don't need to get into that. Everyone knows there's a housing crisis. But when we speak about the ADU bylaw, I think we need to view it in context and compare it to other by right uses of property, because this is essentially about use. Every property owner in Wellfleet has the right to max out their lot coverage and their septic capacity. That's the right you have. You can do that. In other words, the bedrooms and structures that can be built on your property are already allowed by right. So when we're talking about what we're talking about, here is use. Zoning is developed to minimize detriments to neighborhoods and communities. So when we're talking about use, we have to ask ourselves whether the use of a year-round rental in an already allowed structure is more detrimental than other allowed uses. We currently have entire neighborhoods filled with empty houses that are used as short-term rental businesses by right. And I can't think of anything more detrimental than the way our community and neighborhoods have been hollowed out by that use. Sorry. We also allow private guest houses by right in town. And I don't know if you guys have really looked at what the private guest house use and definition is. There's no bylaw there. There's no restrictions on that other than that essentially with the private guest house bylaw, by right, you can rent up to 6 units on a property as a short-term rental, so long as they don't have a stove in them. There's no other restrictions. No limit on bathrooms, no restrictions on whether they have to be attached or detached. The only difference is that they can't have a stove in them. So, when we look at this bylaw, it's not restrictive, but it's not restrictive by mistake. It's not restrictive by design. It's intent to increase year-round housing stock within the parameters of what's already allowed to exist on a property. So the conversation we're having is about allowed use of structures that are already allowed on a lot. My question to the planning board and to the town, and I think it gets to the heart of the discussion, is whether year-round housing as a use is more detrimental than short-term rental uses we currently allow by right in the town of Wellfleet. And so essentially that's my presentation, and that's my question to the board. And I think it's pertinent. And I think when you look at the bylaw as a whole, this essentially allows our property owners to contribute to our housing crisis, so long as they meet the criteria of the bylaw, and it doesn't cost the town any money. I mean, we don't have to put money, we don't have to throw money at this. There's 8 other towns on Cape Cod, I believe, right now, that have by right ADUs. In Brewster, they're making them more lenient. I talked to our new town administrator today, Charlie Sumner, about their experience there in Brewster, and it's been a positive one. They initially put a limit of 20 units per year. They've never had anything close to that. They're now working to make it more lenient and less restrictive to encourage more development. And the reality is, we all know that with building costs and who really wants to put a year-round dwelling on their property, okay, that most of these things are going to wind up in either structures that already exist. They're going to wind up in walkout basements or areas that are potentially have kitchenettes that could have a stove added to them for relatively short money. And some of those are already potentially being used in an illegal manner. This bylaw allows people to do this legally. We all know what's going on in town, and we don't have to get into that. But that's my presentation to the board, and I'd like to hear from the planning board.
Mike,
Can you answer Jerry's question? What's different between the two?
Yeah,
thanks, David.
there's a couple things that are different. I don't have it up on here. They're mainly language things that came to us between when the petitioned article and the select board article was placed. I think the primary difference is that we still have editing power over this bylaw. So we have not finalized the warrant, so we can make some adjustments to it if the board sees fit to do so. But there's not a substantive difference in the bylaw itself, other than who's presenting it and who's sponsoring it.
So do you know what the difference is?
Yeah.
What is it?
I'd have to bring the bylaws up onto the screen. But you guys have the bylaws, so you should be able to compare the two and
Find the difference, is that it?
yeah. I mean, you've had it for a couple weeks, so.
And you wrote it, you don't know the difference?
We sponsored it. I do know the difference, David.
Then what is it?
It's minor linguistical changes that were
That's
brought.
BS. What is it? What is the substantive changes? I want to know.
All right, David.
That's kind of off topic, David. Let's look at the bylaw that's in front of you and discuss it, please.
Okay,
It's
David,
really irrelevant.
you got, David, you got your point. Mr. Chairman, I have to agree with my fellow member that, the select board submitted a second bylaw. I would have guessed that these things are so close that you could have cited what you changed.
Sure, I will bring the bylaw up and cite, I just don't want to say, I don't want to, Helen
it, Helen.
has her hand up. Helen can speak to those changes.
Thank you.
But I will say that we did not submit a second bylaw. The petitioned article was petitioned. This bylaw was drafted by several people. Helen can speak to that. Helen was one of the drafters of this bylaw. It was professionally drafted. We followed the process all along. The petitioners decided to petition this in case the select board decided not to sponsor the bylaw. So there were former members of zoning board of appeals, members of zoning board of appeals. The building inspector was consulted, Harry Turkanian. There was a lot of professional drafting and people experienced in this type of thing. Attorney Bruce Beerhans. And Helen, go ahead. And Jerry, if you would like, through you, Helen could probably answer the changes that we made.
Okay, the paperwork that we do have, and Mr. Chairman, unless the article numbers, and I know you're still placing articles on the warrant, just for clarification, I've made an assumption that Article 45 was the one submitted by the select board and Article 46 was submitted by petition. Is my assumption correct?
Ellen,
Hi, Helen.
Hi.
It's on mute.
changed. The numbers have been changed recently, so.
Have I been recognized?
Yes, you have, Helen.
Thank you. To answer Mr. Rao's reasonable question, there is nothing different. You know the way you can tell them apart? The petition article is second. And the article that was not drafted by the select board, but submitted by the select board with its complete support, has the section that shows the schedule of uses, the one submitted by the select board is kind of a blue, it's kind of blue, and that's the only way you can tell them apart. Otherwise, there's no difference. And Mike was completely accurate
So we're
about,
voting on color?
Jerry?
Is that it?
Well, no, actually, there is one difference on there that the select board made and actually addresses something that David Rowell had brought up.
I see you, Sharon. I got you. Wait a minute. Go
It
ahead, Mike.
actually addresses something David Rowell had brought up in the last meeting about the definition of multifamily dwellings and where they fit. And so if you look at I don't have the bylaw up in front of me. I don't have a packet, but I can bring it up. The section where it says that all of the rules and regulations of the zoning, state, and
You got a section number, Mike?
Oh,
I don't have it in front of me right now. I'm trying to bring it up on here.
I have it. It's 6.21.2 accessory dwelling unit. And I believe that there's a sentence added, which is what I noticed when I tried to compare them. At the
Yeah.
very end, the select board adds unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw.
Which addresses the issue of the multifamily dwelling definition. And if you were to try and attempt to sort of make that link, that this bylaw does allow these as a single family dwelling, on a single family dwelling. So that is one change.
So, and there's the direct question I was asking. What is the difference? So but you don't mention the word, I'm sorry. and I don't even want to go there at this moment. Helen, you had the floor. I think you were cut off. I want to make sure that you, in fact, finished what your train of thought was.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I think that language was in there before that,
No, it was not.
but the person to ask also is Sharon. Okay,
Okay, well,
Sharon has her hand up.
she has her hand up, but you know, the presentation from the selectmen was that Mike was going to make the presentation. I asked the question. I felt it was certainly in line what the difference is. Wasn't, I don't, and I mean, no disrespect, I don't think it was a difficult decision. But if the board, if either Helen or Mike want to say that Sharon has got the answer to that question, then I'll certainly move to her. But before I do, Helen, are you
yeah,
okay?
Mike is right. I've got both copies right here in front of me. And it was that as allowed, unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw, was put in there after the petition article was submitted. I was wrong. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Sharon?
So there were three changes. There was the addition of that phrase, unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw. In the next section down, 6.21.2.1, the words may be are stricken and replaced with the word are.
All right, 6.21.1.
6.21.2.1. Accessory dwelling units, instead of may be, it says accessory dwelling units are allowed.
Oh,
And then there's one more change. Shall I tell you?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Section 6.2.
6.21.2.1.
there is no.
No,
there-
yeah,
no.
there is.
I don't have that.
I mean,
Oh,
is it in the petitioned article? It must be in the petitioned
It's in
article.
both.
No,
No, it's not in both.
oh, it's
No.
just,
All right,
in
let me.
it's just a
if I can-
typo. It's a typo in the
It's the
select
next
board one.
section down from where it says unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw.
That's
Okay,
point
then there's all right, there's a page. What I have is after unless otherwise allowed by law. On section 6.21.2. It then goes to section 6.21.2 again, but no one, accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's the one. So that was a typo in the numbering.
Okay.
It's right in my copy. So I don't know where that happened. In any case, accessory dwelling units are allowed as opposed to may be allowed.
So accessory dwelling units are allowed either as a detached building or as a separate dwelling within or attached to a dwelling, a building used for principal use or within attached accessory building as defined in section 3. Okay,
Exactly so.
so that was the first change. What was
That's
the
the second, that's the second change. The first change was adding unless otherwise occupied, or allowed. Okay, so that's 2. Are you ready for the third?
No, let me go back to the first one. Where was that?
Just above where we just were. 6.21.2. You already covered
Unless
it.
otherwise allowed. Okay,
Yes.
yep, all right.
Okay, number 3.
Number 3.
Okay, so it was felt by one of the select board members that the section about opportunity for affordable housing property tax exemption.
Give me a number, please.
Well, it's different in the 2 different ones because it got moved. So the one I'm not sure. It's either 6.21.6.
Huh, yeah.
6.21.26 opportunity for affordable housing.
Yes,
Okay,
that was previously listed up above, maybe between procedure and monitoring.
Jesus.
Or it was just moved down on the page. All the wording is exactly the same. It's just the order in which it appears.
okay. All right,
Which
So-
section is that?
that is section 6.21.6.
Right.
So we got, at this moment, I'm going to address planning board just for a second.
Um,
Planning board
uh,
members,
this-
you all set with those are the changes between the two?
Jerry,
David B. Fox.
if I may, there's one other minor change as well.
Brian?
So 5.4.6, the select boards, adds at the end of the sentence, subject to any requirements of the state. The petition omits that phrase.
Well, I don't have that on the bylaw. I don't have that on the bylaw, and I'm not even sure that was advertised that way.
Yeah, that's a problem.
May I say something?
Certainly, Helen?
These may be very useful, valid amendments, but I don't remember the select board voting on any of them.
Yeah, we voted on these, Helen, a while ago.
We didn't vote on
Oh,
all.
Jesus.
So
David?
the 5.4.6, intensity of use application to accessory dwelling units. It's towards the top of the bylaw.
No, I'm very familiar with where it is, but,
And then it says, on the select boards, it says, an accessory dwelling unit shall consist of a minimum of 200 square feet of livable floor area, subject to any requirements of the state. Whereas the petition bylaw has 5.4.6, as an accessory dwelling unit shall consist of a minimum of 200 square feet of livable floor area, period.
I don't remember us voting on it. I remember the issue coming up and being.
Helen, we
Thank
did. So,
I- Yeah, okay, well,
We certainly did.
That's the
I
fourth.
So do we know what we're,
All right, this is the.
let's not, sorry about that.
It's not a problem, but this is a planning board meeting, so you guys can iron that problem out at your own meeting. All I'm concerned about is for the board members, that at least the planning board members and of course the general public is aware of that is the simple difference between the two. Now, Mike, excuse me for not calling you Mr. Chair, but it's so much easier for me to.
You're the chair right now, so.
Okay.
You got
Mike, when you, in your opening discussion,
Mhm.
I just need to make something clear in my own mind, and and maybe probably some of the members, is as far as I knew through this process, the first article that came into the town of Wellfleet's town clerk office was the petitioned article. And that's the reason I advertised it on the 5th of May. That was the only article the planning board or myself ever knew existed. It wasn't until later that we realized and filtered down that there was a second article submitted by the Board of Selectmen. And I totally and absolutely understand what the Board of Selectmen is going through with all the transitions that we've had in the past month. And you guys have got your hands full. But so I'm just trying to relate as to, we got the petitioned article first,
Right.
then we got your article. So
I can,
since the petitioner is here, and I think Sharon probably, and she will speak up, and I'll kind of point it to her as well. I think the petitioned article, I had always thought was the principal article. Is the petitioner and that petitioned their article submitted to town clerk, are they on board with the selectmen's article? Or are they, do we have two different camps on these bylaws? I'm slightly confused. Sharon, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, I believe they're fine with any changes that get made.
You believe that the petitioner is fine with any changes that the Board of Selectmen made on on their article referred over to the planning board.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I think, any members got a question on that? I think
Yeah,
at
so
least-
if they're fine with the changes, why don't they withdraw one of them so we can only talk about one, present one to town meeting?
Well, it's a little late now because they're probably in the warrant, David, but I think from a point of view where I'm trying to go is if that's the case, it would make it easier if the selectmen and the petitioners would at least say, okay, talk about at least one of these bylaws.
Well, so Jerry, I can just, if I may, for a second.
Absolutely.
Basically, what happened is there's a deadline for a petitioned article. And
Yep.
so in order to meet that deadline, to make sure that an ADU bylaw wound up on this warrant, I believe the petitioners went ahead and put that forward. And I would not be surprised if it was withdrawn as the select board did decide to take the bylaw and sponsor it and send it to the planning board. But the reason you got that first was because that was the deadline for a petitioned article to be met. And the select board had to work through all the issues it was working through before we took it up. So it was the intent of the select board. We're a board of 5 people. So obviously no one can say what's going to happen until we take it up and vote on it and, you know, pour through it. The process I personally have been following from the beginning and had some updates on the language and what was going on. So I feel confident in the drafting of the bylaw, and I'm familiar with the bylaw. I'm not that familiar with the petitioned bylaw. I don't know what stage it was in when it was petitioned. I don't know if we got a draft, and that's why I didn't want to speak to what David asked, because I didn't read the petitioned bylaw. It never came to us. What came to us was a bylaw that had been, I think, amended from that point when we got to the select board, but I don't know, you know?
It can't be amended because once it hits the treasurer's
no.
the
I'm
clerk's
telling you.
office,
Yes,
it has to remain the same.
we did not receive the petitioned bylaw, is what I'm telling you.
You had to have, Mike, because you are the only ones that could refer it over to the planning board. The only process is, once it gets petitioned, the clerk stamps it, then goes up to the selectman's office because they are the ones that have to refer it to the planning board. So you did kick it over to us.
We did not act on that, though. We didn't make any changes.
It's not
to-
your
all we did
position
was
to
sign up.
act on it. It is your
Right.
position to send it over.
We have to send it over. But
Yes.
what I'm saying is the bylaw that came to us came from the housing authority and the
Okay.
drafters of that bylaw, not
Okay,
from
we're
the,
set.
That's all.
We're good. We're good on that. I think that that clarifies, at least for me, and I think for the board members, that basically what I'm reading is Article 45 is as.
Jerry,
So-
you have a hand up. Rebecca has a hand up.
Who does?
I do.
Rebecca,
Rebecca.
Eldridge.
Oh, my God,
Yes.
Rebecca.
So I actually have
me.
to tell you that I did contact the town clerk. When you had asked for who the petitioner was, there was actually no name as a petitioner. It came in already signed with all the signatures. There was not one person, according to the town clerk, that petitioned that article. She did not have a name on file. That's why I never sent it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So shouldn't it have a name on file? To make it
From what I
legal?
understand, I don't think it needs to because it has 26 signatures as a petitioned article.
Okay, that's my
Yeah, I think it
question.
hit-
Yep, that's,
David, I think it hit the minute the town clerk certifies that it hit 10 registered voters in the town of Wellfleet, that's all it needs, and that's what gets.
that's all it
voted.
needs. That's all. Okay, fair
You-
question. Yep. that's all I need to
Usually
know.
there is a lead individual that's submitting it that we usually go to, but in this case, there didn't have to be.
Well, of course, Jerry, a question through you to Mike is, what is it? There's obviously a time stamp for the petitioned article. What is the time stamp for an article petitioned by the selectmen, or is that in perpetuity?
There's no timestamp on it. We're not petitioning it.
You're submitting it.
We're submitting.
Okay, to the.
You're
David,
presenting it.
if I can answer that, I believe they have to follow the 3 individuals, to my knowledge, that can submit a zoning bylaw is one, of course, the planning board.
Yep,
Number 2, by petition.
yep.
Number 3, Board of Selectmen.
Okay,
So they have the right to petition or send an article over to the planning board. That article, however, like the planning board and a petition article, to the best of my knowledge, and I do not pretend to be an attorney, has to be vented the same way we would vent our article or any other article.
so
Therefore,
what was submitted is frozen in time. No changes can be made, thus forth.
I believe that the planning board, once we submit an article and have a public hearing, we can make changes to that article from the public hearing. And I also believe that we have to go through the process again, because now you've got to let the public know what in fact you are doing.
That's what I thought.
I do believe the selectmen's article would have to go through the same process. But again, that is something that I would have to reach out to town council to confirm. I would suggest, and I don't mean to beat my chest here, but I would suggest with 25+ years that any changes the Board of Selectmen would like to make to the article should really be held off and not confuse anything, and send it to town and make those changes on town meeting floor. I think
Ooh,
in the warrant, I think that would be a lot clearer for all parties concerned. Because time is of the essence, and I think you guys want to get the print tomorrow.
Yeah.
But that's, of course, your bailiwick, and that's just a suggestion. All right. So if,
Jerry, you have a hand? Elaine McElroy?
okay, Elaine,
Hi. Hi. I just wanted to mention that I did talk with Dan Silverman about the process of the select board's article. And he said that it was much, if the warrant wasn't closed, it was much preferable to make the changes before that. The select board had every right to make changes before that. And that was preferable to amending an article on town meeting floor. So I just wanted to report that information I had from the moderator.
did he say those changes had to be minor in nature and not substantial?
I know on town meeting floor they have to be. I don't know if he meant that. I don't know if he meant that for that process.
Jerry, I can add to this if I may.
Certainly.
I did talk to town council about this because they had submitted some recommendations. Most of those are not substantive, and those minor changes could be made without it going back to the planning board because they're not substantive in nature.
We'll open that up, Mike, to the.
Not all of them. There were
Yeah,
some.
there you go. Thank you, because there is one of them I know that is.
There is a couple that are substantive, but we could make unsubstantive changes.
Yeah, that's what well, that's
one better-
consistent.
The legalese.
Yes, that's consistent, that if they're minor changes in nature, just like the planning board, we don't have to advertise. But if all of a sudden that 900 square foot one came into being, that would be a substantial change and we would have to rehear it. So, okay, we're on this, I think we're on the same wavelength as far as that goes. So I'm gonna, at this moment, I'm gonna keep this public hearing open. And I'm gonna reopen, just for clarification, the petitioned article hearing on May 5th. So I can get them both on the table legally. So I don't have to look over my shoulder to worry about who we're talking about, what we're talking about. We've had, planning board members, we've had the input on the article by the select board, and we've had the input from the petitioned article on May 5th. We discussed, the planning board, the petitioned article on May 5th between board members after the presentation by the petitioners. However, I kept that open, and it appeared at that meeting that we had more individuals that wanted to comment on the planning board's discussion. And I assured them that since I had not closed the public hearing, that ability was still there and would be there tonight. So I'm going to open that up to preferably something new to the general public to weigh in on public comment, either something on what the planning board said at the last meeting or something new, preferably not bringing up something that we've already discussed. But I would like everybody to know it is now 8 o'clock. We have two other issues that I need to get to tonight for the selectmen, which is the right to farm and which is the High Toss Road taking. I plan and will do everything in my power to get to that point tonight. Even if I have to bring this hearing or continue this hearing to the next meeting, which we may in fact have to have a special meeting for, but I'm letting everybody know up front. Please keep your comments concise and let's not get repetitive. I don't want to cut anybody off. I want to get as much input as we can, but I do have an agenda that I have to keep to. So with that, and I've let the planning board know before we started that that was where we were going to go tonight. So with that, I would like to open this up. As you can see, I have discussed with the planning board secretary that if I am missing somebody's hand, she has permission to interrupt me. I prefer nobody else. do.
Sharon's hand is up, Jerry.
Thank you.
Sharon,
Yeah, I will have her cut in and let me know that, for example, Sharon's hand was up and I didn't see it, so therefore I'll call on Sharon, but this is open now to anybody that wants to speak. Sharon. You're muted, Sharon.
There we go.
There you go.
So I know other people want to respond to some things that came up last week. And the one thing that I was particularly bothered by was this notion that these would all turn into Airbnbs and that everyone, I got the sense that, of a very cynical crowd here. I think there are people who are actually philanthropic. I happen to know quite a few who would like to build an ADU and provide year-round housing to someone. I also think that the bylaw is enforceable by virtue of one, the affidavit, which if a person is found in violation of it, they probably wouldn't, be more than a slap on the wrist the first time, but that's an alert. And if they knowingly break the affidavit, then they are subject to being taken to court for perjury. And in addition to that, they also have a $300 fine, potentially a day. And in addition to that, Airbnb is working hard with communities across the country to try and make things more, make it easier for municipalities to manage properties so that year-round residents are not losing their homes. So that's the main thing that I'm going to just say right now, because I know other people are waiting to speak. Thank you.
Okay. I won't respond to that or have planning board members responsible, but respond, but planning board members just take that into consideration. Yes, anyone else?
Jerry, we have Michael and then Ryan.
Mike Vasco? Oh, Michael,
Yes,
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Airbnb is is allowed by right.
I'm sorry, Mike?
Airbnb is allowed by right in this town, so long as you don't have a stove.
Yes.
The public guest house allows 6 units on a property, so long as you have septic capacity.
No. Mike, let me clarify that for you.
Okay, public guest house, not private.
Public guest house definition.
Yep.
Is a one-family dwelling in which 6 bedrooms, 6 rooms are offered for rent. Primary
Agreed.
purpose of
Not
furnishing
more than-
overnight lodging, and is only allowed in 3 districts, and those districts are by special permit. So wherever they go, it's by special permit, number 1. Number 2, even to get there, they have to get by septic. They have to have an approved septic system in the ground for 6 bedrooms. But it is by permit, by special permit, not by right. Substantially different. So that's just a clarification of our zoning bylaw. Okay, and I'm literally looking at it and reading it right in front of me. Okay. Private guest house is a detached semi-building, basically 1 unit, can't be more than 250 square feet. So if it's 1 bedroom, it's private. So you can.
For no money.
Yeah.
And you can't charge money.
That's possible. I just changed the page, David, but that's that.
Yeah, on private guest house, you can't charge money.
Yep, okay. So, who else was on there besides Mike?
Ryan.
Ryan, okay. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've also reviewed the previous planning board meeting on the ADU bylaw that was, or the petitioner's ADU bylaw. And I want to take the opportunity to respond to some of the issues that were raised around wastewater. Currently, so the only thing that actually increases load is additional people. As having a kitchen does not meaningfully increase the load in a wastewater system. It's 145 gallons per bedroom. Is that right? Is that 145?
No,
Not even close.
No, how
110.
many gallons?
110.
110 gallons per bedroom. And in terms of nitrogen, 99% of the nitrogen load that goes into a septic system is from basically our bathrooms. There is almost no nitrogen whatsoever going down people's kitchen sinks. So allowing a parcel that's allowed 5 bedrooms, if those 5 bedrooms are in a 5-bedroom house, the wastewater load is effectively the same as if it was a 4-bedroom house with a ADU or 1-bedroom ADU on the parcel as well. So I just wanted to make that clear. So thank you.
Okay, Ryan, that is That's true,
Somewhat true, but not fully true.
not fully. The board has looked at it.
I mean, I can send you countless
No, I
studies if you
follow,
want.
Ryan, I know all of that. But there is something in Title V that is extenuating when you issue a new building permit. Or I'm sorry, when you issue a new use of
CO.
occupancy permit that triggers upgrading septic systems that were protected prior to that. So there's more to it than just that. What you said is correct, 110 gallons per
It's
day.
not the full sentence.
But it's just, it's not, we're talking additional things when we mention water than just that particular issue. So, but
I mean,
thanks, that is
respectfully,
correct.
if a homeowner has to upgrade their septic system to install an ADU, it actually will decrease the overall wastewater load into Wellfleet's embayments.
That's absolutely correct, but it's not, we have problems with it now. And you have to upgrade with no variances. That's not
the key.
happening. That's one of the keys. Okay, I'm limited to my screen, so I'm gonna turn to Karen. Is there any other hands up?
Yes, there is. There's one hand up and it looks like it's Helen. Helen has her hand up.
I
Yeah.
saw her. I didn't see the hand though. Hi, Helen. Okay.
Hi. So,
Hi, Beth.
Hi.
it's irrelevant as to whether or not the flow would be increased. Because in order for one of these units to get a building permit, unless they go to the zoning board of appeals or the board of health, which is not going to grant them a variance if they need a serial tank or a double tank for an extra dwelling, it has to comply. These units have to comply. And so even if there were more bedrooms, right,
Would have to
it
comply.
would still have to comply. The septic would still have to be able to handle it, and the intensity of use would have to handle it. And that's the way we built it, so that it wouldn't compromise that particular situation in terms of the groundwater. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Okay, we're done with that.
Remember, if the rest of the boards didn't see, Beth just joined us, planning board member, so she's back on.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's fine. Rebecca Eldridge, I see
You
you.
have
I'm sorry, Karen.
No, I was
somebody's
just,
got a thumbs up.
yeah, I was giving a thumbs up because Beth joined.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I'd just like to stand corrected. What I meant was the bed and breakfast bylaw. Not the
Thanks, Mike.
private guest house. I missed
Yeah,
both.
bed and breakfast.
Is
bed and
allowed
breakfast
Airbnb.
Bed and breakfast allows 3 bedrooms or less as in their bed and breakfast. Other than that, they need a permit.
Right.
That is
Just
correct.
people
But
it
they
is.
have to, but they have to meet septic. All of those issues in our zoning bylaw at the present time had to meet the Title V regulations.
Yes.
So, back when guest house public was done, they had to meet Title V. Once they had those bedrooms, you can't take them away. They could potentially take that multifamily, I'm sorry, they could take that guest house, 6-bedroom, and upgrade it to an accessory dwelling and add an accessory dwelling in there, but they would have to bring up the Title V to current regulations. So we would get to Helen's point, we would get a septic, and to Ryan's point, that we would get a septic system that was upgraded that we were looking for. And I want to remind not only board members, while we still have the open public, if you want to comment on it. Back in the mid-'80s, when we were having water problems downtown and in other areas, the planning board substantially reviewed our planning board uses, taking out gas stations and taking out anything that we felt could, number one, harm our water, and number two, use too much of it. And it was back in the 80s that we took out additional dwelling units on properties throughout Wellfleet. Went back to a primary use only, not 2 or more units on the property. And that was solely because of water and septic. Now, we have solved some of those problems with town water in fairly limited areas, but we still, that is the reason and the sole reason why we changed, maybe not the sole reason, but the sole reason why we changed many of those uses. Okay.
Jerry, you
give it-
have two people. You have
Yep.
Stephanie Cox and you have Helen.
God.
I'm gonna call on Stephanie first, Helen. Stephanie?
Hi there. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie Cox from Smarter Cape. Nice to see you again. Just wanted to kind of bring this back up to high level perspective. I think that the questions of the planning board, the questions and concerns of the planning board have been asked and answered multiple times at this point. It feels, in all honesty, a little circular here in terms of the conversation and not sort of getting us to solutions. I think that we have a clear plan of action in terms of this proposed bylaw. I think that it addresses the wastewater concerns. It addresses the concerns around short-term rentals. It addresses the concerns around enforcement. All of the concerns that have been raised have been addressed. And so now at this point, it really becomes, I think, a question of, are there truly substantive, concerns or questions here that we can answer for you? And if not, is the planning board opposed to this proposal?
I haven't got to that point yet because the planning board has not basically closed. We're still listening to open. We had a public hearing earlier on the petitioned article, on the Selectmen's article. So we're still having to go through those hoops. So, I don't think we didn't cause, and I mean, no offense to the Selectmen or the petitioned article, but we didn't cause the problem with having to go around. 2 articles came in the same thing that we had to advertise and hear in a very, very short period of time before town meeting. So it makes it difficult when you're talking about zoning, and especially zoning of this nature. Okay, I'm gonna, Helen.
I would just urge us to keep our eyes on the substance of the bylaw rather than getting stuck in the muck on procedural issues that I don't think ultimately are going to be relevant for town meeting voters. Thank you.
Helen.
I was going to say 2 things. One of them is what Stephanie just said, only I was going to put it in a kind of sweeter way because, we are all living together here. I checked with Harry just now by text to confirm something which I thought I already knew, and I did. The planning board can suggest changes to the select board's language, but you cannot change it. You could amend it on town meeting floor. That's all I wanted to say.
We clearly understand that.
Oh, okay. You maybe misspoke. I, God knows, misspeak sometimes because you said something you said you could change the language. You can suggest changes.
No, I said that you, the Board of Selectmen,
or we can change
your article so
Yeah.
long as it's not substantial. But the petitioner can't, and the planning board can't change either one of them. Yes, we can make suggestions, but we can't change them.
That's right.
It's not like our article where we can do what you can do in your meeting.
That's
So
right.
I think I thought I was pretty clear on that. All right, Karen, is there anyone else? Because it's now 8:15.
Yes, Michael has his hand up. Michael has his hand up and
Very
Elaine has her
quickly.
hand up.
All right, hold on. You got to give me one at a time. Mike?
Yep. I just would urge the planning board to actually focus on the substance as well, as far as what we're constituting as use and what's currently allowed in our bylaws as use. So that's all. That's just my suggestion. I hope so. And answer the question as to whether, year-round housing as a use is more detrimental to short-term rental uses, which we currently allow. Thank you.
Jerry, Elaine had her hand up, but I think she put her hand back down, but I'm not sure. You want to ask her?
I'm going to ask her anyway. Elaine, you have a question? A statement?
Yep.
No.
No,
Hands
no,
up.
Oh,
no,
go ahead.
no, I just wanted to thank you also and emphasize that I do think questions have been answered, and just in terms of need that I think this will fill. Wellfleet is the only town on the Cape that doesn't allow multifamily zoning in either of our residential districts. And I know that was done for a good reason back in the 70s or 80s. Brewster is actually the only other town that doesn't allow it in residential one, but now they have allowed ADUs. And I do think we really see this as a very useful and conservative way to produce some of the year-round housing we need for our local people. Thank you.
Okay. Who else was there, Karen?
Oh, that's it. You're done. No,
Janet
oh,
Reinhardt.
here's two more.
Oh, jeez.
Hold on. Janet,
Janet Reinhardt?
Jerry,
There we go, there we go.
yes.
So-
Janet Reinhardt.
Yes,
Welcome.
I've been here all along.
I know, I've seen you,
Okay.
but I haven't heard from you.
So I'm listening and I've been wanting to listen to hear what you guys have said. And the main reason I'm on tonight is because I have wanted to hear what your suggestions and or corrections or what problems you do see. And I know we're under a big constraint, but that to me is your job, is for us to submit something and you to go over it and tell us what you think would be needed.
I'm trying to get there, Janet.
I know, okay.
Anybody else? All right, going once, twice.
One more thing, Jerry,
Okay,
just
Michael.
about density, because it hasn't been brought up.
density.
Density, the concern
Okay.
about density on a property, about how this would create too much density. I'd just like to point out that 15% lot coverage also means 85% open space on a lot. And there's no real way to have high density when you have to have 85% open space. That's all.
Okay, Mike. All right. 3. All right, at this point, I am going to close the public hearing on both articles. I think I've given everybody a chance to step in. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the planning board. And to Janet's point, to Carol's point, to Helen's point, we can get to our questions and suggestions and reasons for. If we have a specific, if a board member has a specific question for one of the proponents, such as a selectman, or to Sharon, or to Elaine, or somebody else that wants to speak to it, they have to identify themselves and go through the chair and through Karen. But those are specific questions we would ask and not get into generalities, okay? So what we have not discussed is town council's additions that they had submitted to both articles. They're fairly consistent in nature on both articles. The planning board, as well as the Board of Selectmen, and as well as the petitioners, the petitioner and I believe the petitioner we've notified was given permission or was told that if they wanted to submit it to anybody, it was their job to do so, not the planning board's. It wasn't up to us to go to all 25 or 30 people that signed that petition and make sure they had a copy of this. So I believe all those people concerned have seen the changes that, have seen the input and clarifications from town council. All bylaws by the planning board are vented that way. Most of the time we take a bylaw and we send it to the town council, probably in our preparations, at least 3, sometimes 4 times or more before we get a bylaw that's ready to go. So planning board members, based on what you have received from town council, based on what presentation was made on the Selectmen's article and also the petitioned article, discussion, specific questions, I'm opening up to planning board members.
Jerry, I got a couple.
David.
Well, I think town council substantiates some of my concerns regarding the CO and enforcement. I think it's pretty loosey-goosey once you got your CO, what you can do with it. Now, keep in mind, town council just weighed in on some of the things. They did not weigh in conflicts with our other bylaws in the zoning book, which there are still many out there, okay? And it didn't identify all the problems. So this is still loaded with Swiss cheese as far as I'm concerned. The issue of ownership, that's still wide open. And you see the comments on that. I'm not convinced these can't be condoed out real quick. And there are other mechanisms to separate it and sell them independently. That's just crazy to me. I mean, that's not inappropriate language. It's not clear. And I think it can easily be circumnavigated. As Alfred pointed out last week, you can build 5 units on an acre. That being said, that's 5 units on one parcel. This does not address parking. This is not any of that congestion. 5 units on 1 acre is potentially, well, easily 10 cars. And if you have guests, that's 15 cars on that property. That's a nightmare. Neither one of these articles even mention parking. We have a whole section on the parking schedule for uses. They don't address that. So although both articles are well intentioned, I think it's really premature to take either one of them to town meeting. It would be nice if they were fused, and we might work on this as a planning board and take it next spring when it's a lot more solidified, and perhaps even at that point, our zoning bylaws are codified, because right now our building inspector is going to be faced with arbitrary application of the law. And that goes into section 4.1, which not more than 1 dwelling may be erected, section 5. That hasn't been addressed. So there are a lot of little loopholes that still haven't been clarified. And the rush to pass this, I think, I'm not comfortable with. Because there are a lot of holes. We haven't addressed the water issue. We just scratched the surface of wastewater. We haven't addressed the impact to the municipal water system, which we don't have a department for. It's already pimped out, and they already have loosey-goosey regulations where irrigation is running rampant. That's insane. So and they want to encourage development? No. So we got to tighten up a lot of stuff before this goes on. That's just some of my thoughts at the moment.
Okay, David. Planning board member?
Jerry, you got a hand up, Jerry. Michael.
Oh, God.
You have to recognize me. I just put my hand up if you want to, but go to the planning board if you wish.
No, I'm gonna go, thank you, Mike. I'm gonna stay with the planning board right now unless there was
Yeah.
a question specific.
I just thought it might take a while. So.
Yeah, David Mead Fox.
I'd like to say that I agree with some of what David Rowell said, but I also believe that, to put it simply, I believe we need to move this process forward, and the bylaw moves us in the right direction, however imperfectly. And I believe we could get stuck on making the perfect the enemy of the good. I do believe that particularly 5 of the comments, I can tell you what they are to me, from the town council are particularly beneficial. And I would want to recommend that the select board consider incorporating them. A couple of them, the town council gives, you could do this or you could do that. Well, both of what the town council recommends address a single issue in their comments. So I can say what I think they are, and I just encourage that would, I believe, in a pretty substantial way, improve this. I also believe that, and David Rowell touched on this, that there are so many huge issues involved in all this that no bylaw, however perfectly written, is going to be able to address all of them. These are giant issues of density and housing and water and we can't do it all in one bylaw, but what we can do is begin to move this forward. And if we need to make corrections, I would submit that there are corrections on the table now by town council the select board could consider making. And then secondly, there are changes and additional related bylaws that could be dealt with going forward. But this gets us moving, and I think it's a step worth taking.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? Bonnie?
Yeah, I basically just agree with what David Mead Fox just said. I am in favor of passing this bylaw. I am in favor of taking into account some of the wording changes that the council made. I think some of them, but the select board apparently is going to be debating that tomorrow. And I think if the select board wants more specific comments from us on which of the lawyers' comments seem really to make sense, I'd be happy to go into that. I also think that, I think that some of these worst case scenarios that are being floated are kind of straw people, because there's actually been in the towns that have the ADU bylaws and where it is working well, the numbers created are very small. It's probably going to be less in Wellfleet because of because of having fewer less town water, and so much of the land in Wellfleet being National Seashore. So I would like to kind of put aside the worst case scenarios, because I really don't I think that this bylaw is worth passing if it adds 2 year-round units a year. It's something. And the other thing is that I really think that, this is not germane to the discussion of the bylaw, but to really increase affordable year-round rental housing, we're going to have to talk about incentives. And I think that's all I'm going to say right now. But So I am in favor and I'm going to be voting for it.
Okay, anyone else? Olga?
A number of things. This bylaw is based on the AADU bylaw, and issues like parking, other things that have been brought up have not become a problem. The problem with AADU people, that's the affordable accessory dwelling unit, people feel is the complicated process of income verification and maintaining a low threshold on rent. So we had an opportunity, the planning board, to work on this, and somehow it was deemed too many challenges. It was not possible, so we dropped it. And that's why we have one from an independent group. And I would just like to speak to two things: incentives and enforcement. Enforcement was an issue that we said many meetings ago is off the table. We don't enforce. This is a bylaw that we're not in charge of enforcing. That is up to the town and the will of the town to follow through and make sure not only are these units legal, but perhaps we will look at illegal units and make sure that we have good housing available, not substandard housing. And as far as incentives go, we have in place the Affordable Housing Trust and other options to make this bylaw really work. But it has to be a bylaw first. Then we can incentivize it. That is not what the planning board does. We don't do incentives. So I am voting for it because I think we need it on the books so we can move forward with year-round housing.
Okay.
Year-round rental housing. I'm done.
Anyone else? Okay. It appears I'm in the minority at this point, but to Janet's question, I've got specific questions on the bylaw. I think the planning board has stated numerous times over and over again, we are not against affordable housing. We are not against accessory dwelling units per se. What we are is concerned, as at least as chair, concerned with getting a bylaw that is good, that is workable, and that is fair to the entire community that lives in Wellfleet. So with that, I'm just going to ask a couple questions. The opening line of Article, just for my edification, I'm going to call it Article 45, which I believe encompasses both the petitioned article and the Selectmen's article. The opening line is on Article 4 is to delete the AADU bylaw. I'll tell you why that bothers me considerably is that we have somewhere around, there's a figure floating anywhere between 17 and 19. That is the number that the Board of Appeals has granted special permits for. The latest number I have heard that have officially done the paperwork is approximately 9 or 10. Of those units, 3 are pre-existing that didn't even need special permits. So we've lost a number of them. What I'm afraid of, quite honestly, is that AADUs are by special permit. If this bylaw goes through, without some other additional work to it, that an individual that has a restriction on their deed that they must rent it to AADU compatible individuals, meet the threshold, walks back to the Board of Appeals and says, thank you very much. I no longer want that AADU. Please release my notification at the Registry of Deeds. I'm going to turn that over as a by right, full market value house. Forgo the $300 or $400 rent in tax credit from the town of Wellfleet, and up my rent by $300 or $400 a month. And we lose a good deal. We won't lose them all, but we will lose a good deal of the AADUs. And as much as we need additional dwelling units for rent, we also need a good deal of ADUs for rent. So that's one of my first concerns with this article. The second concern and question is the definition of dwelling accessory. You're attempting to delete, and I understand the definition of dwelling affordable accessory, and replace it with dwelling accessory, but it's listed, it's not consistent with that name in the definition or in the wording of the article, because it goes back and forth between dwelling accessory and accessory dwelling. But it seems that the dwelling accessory interferes and separates the unit rather than the present definition, dwelling affordable accessory, because it includes the unit within or attached to a principal dwelling. I'm wondering whether there's a consistency here on the definition, because when we add a freestanding unit, that is a secondary primary use on that property. If the bylaw was just saying initially to try this out, to restrict it to a unit within a structure, or similar what town council had come back there with, what the state had passed, is a percentage of increase not to exceed 50% of the present floor area. It does two things. It number one, started with getting these units and keeping them units in existing structures. And it sees whether those units will be built, keeps the size down, and does not create as much of an additional footprint with parking, with first floor area, with backyards and things of that nature. So I have a problem with the clarity of accessory dwelling definition in its entirety and in the use throughout the bylaw. The second one I've got is 6.21.2. Accessory dwelling unit is not defined. Dwelling accessory is defined. So is that going to be confusing? Go ahead, Mike.
There's a comma, dwelling accessory. That's just how things are. I mean, in a lot of the definitions, it'll say building accessory, but they're referred to as accessory buildings in the zoning bylaws. The comma is what it says, dwelling comma accessory, not dwelling accessory. Or there should be a comma if there isn't. There might be a typo in yours. I don't know.
The one I've got is the one with the changes from town council. And I'm seeing, Mike, that in fact, there appears after dwelling, there's a comma accessory.
That's what's
It's
supposed to
red.
be. Mhm.
So it's probably something that they're saying should be changed, which would in fact probably make sense to make sure that comma is in there to be consistent with the definitions that we have in the way we write them. So
Yeah.
I honestly didn't catch the red little comma. 5.4.6, why is can somebody tell me why is it this being changed? The present seems fine at 150 and 250. If it's a one bedroom, it's got to be over 150. If it's a two bedroom, it's got to be over 250. I'm quite frankly surprised that it wasn't changed to state that a one bedroom would have been increased to 250 and that a two bedroom would have been increased to 350 as a minimum. Because those are really
Jerry, there's,
minimum areas for
those-
somebody to live in.
yeah, Jerry, those are arbitrary standards. There are standards for that. So I don't know what ass they pulled those out of, but I don't know where they came from, but there are standards. And I suggest those are really artificially low, you know, because you need to have a bedroom, which is 70 right off the top. And then bathroom has a requirement area and kitchen has a minimum standard performance. So I don't know where they got those numbers from. I mean, it came off the Rainbow Coalition or something, as far as I can tell.
Well, you're wrong, David.
Where'd you get them from?
They come from the state of minimum allowed use of 150 under 200 square feet. There's different building codes.
Title III habitation code, did it come from that? 'Cause that's where it's come from. The habitation
talk to
code
the
is a
building
minimum
inspector.
standard.
You'd have to talk to the building inspector. He's the one who
He gave you those numbers personally?
not personally, no. You can refer to Helen, probably
those-
more details. She was involved in.
Yeah,
the
those are one of the questions. That's one of the questions I had.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the building inspector is on the call. So if you would like to address some of those questions to him, he might be able to give you a more coherent answer. Thank you.
Well,
Sure.
Hi, Jerry.
I,
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yeah, there's actually no restriction in the building code there's no minimum size for a dwelling in the building code. There's minimum room size of 70 feet, no minimum.
But Paul, that would be in the habitation code under Title II or Title III, right? That'd be a
Right.
Board of Health standard for minimum
Health
habitation.
standards, not building code.
Correct, yes. That's what I'm asking. Where did it come from? Because there is a standard for bathroom size, there's a standard for bedroom size in building code. But habitation code would be dictated by Title II or Title III. I don't know which number it is off the top of my head, but it's a definitive standard that should be out there.
Yes, there's a
Correct.
minimum room size, minimum ceiling height,
Yeah.
minimum clearances in bathrooms, but there's actually no minimum size for dwelling unit.
right. And that's what I understood. And that's why I felt, quite frankly, and what you're asking for is input here. So what I felt was those numbers should have been increased to, you know, if a single person is living in something, really 150 square feet, that should have
That's
been.
what I say. It's in
you know,
Title III, Jerry. You just have to find that information out. It's not in building
No, but
code.
we
Paul
could've-
said that.
Yeah, we could have changed it though. We could have.
We can't change it, no.
Yeah. The other one was 5.47 does not seem to be consistent with 5.46. 5.46, intensity of use, an accessory dwelling unit shall consist of a minimum of 200 square feet of livable floor area, subject to any requirements of the state. 4.7 is hereby amended to follow. No dwelling unit shall be converted into 2 or more units unless each resulting unit consists of 600 square feet.
So Jerry,
Yeah,
could we make all of these our recommendations for changes to the proposal? And then wait to see if that happens before we vote?
we could, but I'm not, I'll be honest.
We're not here to write it.
Yeah,
I'm
Beth,
But
we're not,
our input is being asked for. So, and our input is important. So if we make a list of all the recommendations that are valid, that I'm hearing, to improve the proposal of the select board, we can't touch the other one. And then
we can't, to answer your question, we can't touch either one. What
no, but we can
do-
recommend that they make adjustments.
Right, right.
Yes,
That's what I'm suggesting.
yes, we can.
We make a list of all of these valid recommendations for change to the proposal and give it to the select board to act on it or not before we vote.
We could certainly, oh, before we vote?
Yes, because if the proposal is going to change significantly based on our suggestions, then we might vote differently.
Okay, I see. Some of these were just questions. They weren't necessarily something I'm saying change. They're just clarifications that I wasn't too sure of.
Can I answer
The other
that
one
question?
was touched on, but I'm not positively clear on it. Our definition of a multifamily dwelling is a detached structure with 2 or more living units. So when we all of a sudden add a accessory dwelling to a principal residence, it seems on the surface that makes it a multifamily.
It does.
Now,
And
I
there-
realize that, and that's one of the reasons why I asked to go over what the changes were. I realized there was an attempt now by someone, and I think it was the Board of Selectmen, to make a wording change at the end of one of the paragraphs to clarify that it wasn't a multifamily dwelling. And I'm going to go back to that question specifically because the change that I was reading didn't mention the word multifamily. It wasn't specific. So what kind of burden does that put on the building inspector to interpret when you add, I know we have a conflict with the AADU, but hadn't surfaced. And we
No, we
also
challenged it.
planning board that we need to update that. But this is a question that popped into my mind that I'm unclear on as far as where either the select board or the petitioners, but I believe it ended up in the selectmen's hands as to what you changed to clarify that, because I know you mentioned it, and I think it was Mike.
Yeah. Yeah, so in 6.21.2, it states an accessory dwelling as defined in section 2.1 definitions of the Wellfleet zoning bylaws is an additional dwelling unit allowed in a single lot in all districts of the town if in compliance with all town, Commonwealth of Massachusetts and federal statutes, bylaws, and regulations where applicable, unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw. This bylaw allows you to put an ADU, which is also a definition, onto a single family property. And Therefore, it supersedes the multifamily definition because you're saying it's allowed here. And so by putting unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw, you can't supersede state code. You can't do that. But you can, in bylaws, supersede other zoning bylaws. And so when you add that language, unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw allows you to put ADUs on a single family lot under these provisions. So the provisions are laid out in the bylaw. And if you follow those provisions, you can do that. And that's what that language states.
Well, Mike, I
David?
gotta take offense with that because this is already in conflict, because what that sentence says is additional dwelling unit allowed on a single lot in all districts. Well, in the NSP, it's not allowed, it's allowed by special permit. That's a significant difference. So you have conflict already right there in your own bylaw that you've written. Okay, that's a big difference. So what does that sentence mean? That's arbitrary enforcement. I could go and say, I'm in the NSP, I want it, I don't want to go for a special permit. It says right here that I don't have to. It says in your use category, you have to go for a special permit. So that's already in conflict. That's why I say this is a monster that needs to be looked at.
No, it's not in conflict, David. It's not in
David?
conflict. It's not.
Yes, it
because
is. Special permit is different than by right.
you have to comply with the bylaw in order to get the dwelling unit. I mean, the bylaw exists with provisions you have to comply with.
Okay.
Jerry?
And I don't mean, no, hold on, please. I don't mean to put building inspector on the spot, but it all comes down to the building inspector and how he defines and how he reads the zoning bylaw. I don't know, Paul, if you haven't, by all means, tell me if you haven't written or read that particular section in this bylaw, but is it clear to you if someone comes in, whether it's a multifamily or if it is, but this bylaw allows it and you're okay? Or are you still in a bind?
Well, the multifamily says two or more units is a multifamily. Finds multifamily, so
But does this bylaw,
one accessory dwelling unit allowed in a principal dwelling unit. I believe that's how the affordable accessory was written before,
it was?
but now
But that
this new
doesn't
one I just saw
necessarily mean-
tonight.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we were right then.
Yes, we
And
weren't.
then the new one that I just saw tonight, that so more than one accessory dwelling unit can be constructed within another one. Well, that's certainly multifamily. That's
Yeah, that's prohibited.
townhomes. I mean, there's no intensity of use schedule for the ADUs. Separation of buildings. I haven't seen that.
So the attempt, just so I'm clear, and I think this is a point for the petitioner or for the Board of Selectmen's article. The intent on 6.21.2, if I understand Mike, is the attempt to say the way this paragraph is written, we are negating the fact that multifamilies are only allowed in the commercial district and not calling an accessory structure in a dwelling a multifamily. I'm not
That's a
sure
Frankenstein.
that's
Well,
clear
no,
to you, and it's not clear to me.
Can I quickly?
I think, can I just say something, Mike, before
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
I think one of the other member, I don't know if it was Olga or who mentioned it about the affordable accessory dwelling unit, that this was kind of piggybacked off that initial that we had, but that was by special permit. And I mean,
Correct. Yeah.
housing before I got into the inspecting business, I was with housing assistance for 7 years. So I'm very familiar with seeing the benefits of affordable housing in a community. I think that having this by right has the potential to really conflict with our existing zoning bylaws.
Paul, can I ask you a question, Paul?
Sure.
So in that sentence here, in where is it? 6.21.2, where it says bylaws and regulations where applicable, unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw. The point of that being in there is that to say that this bylaw allows accessory dwelling units on single-family lots in all districts. And therefore, if you comply with this bylaw, it allows that, right? So that would supersede the other use table. But you can't just put a multifamily. You have to, in order to do it, you have to abide by the bylaw that's written here for this to supersede that. So when you say, and this came to me through a lawyer, and that in this definition where you say, unless otherwise allowed by this bylaw is allowing this to happen. And in the use table, it gives permitting by right in all districts, but not for multifamily dwellings. For ADUs, which has its own definition, that are that comport to this exact bylaw. It has to be year-round. It can't be separated from ownership. There's a bunch of provisions in this bylaw, which if you comply with them, it would make it allowed, right? So that's where the attempt was made. And I mean, how do you read that, I guess? But does that answer that problem?
Well, it's really, I mean, it is multifamily housing. It's just that it's rental multifamily housing. That's
Still multifamily.
the ownership's
yeah.
really the only difference there. And
Well,
I'll
it
be
has to be
limited
around.
by the bylaws, and I'll be limited by the bylaws to what I can condition it on. So where you're allowing it by right, there's a potential there for a proposal to come before building department that and butters may not like, and there's really nothing that we can do about it. And we won't know what that is until it comes to the table.
It happens.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be, I'm sure, a very small percentage, but when it happened, it's probably going to be could become an issue.
I think Stephanie Cox has an answer to this.
Before I get to Stephanie.
Jerry? I've been quiet all night. At some point, I'd like a moment.
Yeah, 1 second. Thanks, Alfred. 1 second. Helen?
Yes, to sum up what Michael said in a few words. This ADU kind of multifamily, physically, there may be more than one family in the dwelling or on the lot, but it's a different classification than a multifamily dwelling as defined in the bylaws. And standalone, it has to meet exactly what's required in the bylaw. The other thing I wanted to say is in 6.21.2, the most important, through you, Jerry, to David, the most important word in that sentence really, and I put it in there, is allowed on a single lot in all districts of the town if in compliance with all these different statutes and bylaws unless otherwise allowed. And there are very few exceptions in this bylaw to the regular zoning bylaws and other regulations. There are none to the Board of Health regulations, but there are very few exceptions. The intensity of use, livable square floor area is different, and it resembles the AADU, envelope in which you can have livable square floor area. So thank you. I just wanted to make those 2 points. It's a different classification. And I greatly appreciate if you guys looked at it in a standalone way like that. Thank you.
I did, and I kind of agree with the building inspector, is that I see it as a potential problem, number one, if in fact, because the only place we have multifamily is commercial, if you're taking it out of commercial entirely and made accessories, possibly that might have been a way to handle it, but I think there was a better way to handle it because I think there's going to be a conflict. That's all I'm pointing out. You're asking for input from planning board members, and I'm giving you that kind of input. The other question I had was on.
Hey, Jerry, can Stephanie answer that? Because I've talked to her about
No.
this.
I want to hear Alfred.
Pertinent information.
Before I go, Stephanie, did you, because Alfred's not going anywhere for the moment. Stephanie, did you have something?
Yeah, just real quick. I know it's relatively new, so not everybody's super familiar with it. But at the end of last year, literally in December, towards the end of the legislative session, the legislature passed and the governor signed into law the Housing Choices Act as part of the economic bond bill, which clearly defines and allows for accessory dwelling units and multifamily. And there's separate, kind of rules around both and definitions around both. So I know that's somewhat new, but that's the HED, the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, has created guidance for communities that might have questions about this. But I think if by creating an ADU, you were somehow superseding or conflating with multifamily in terms of the interpretation, it would have come up for other communities. And it'd be something that HED would be addressing. But to my knowledge, it's not. And other communities, again, around the state have been able to adopt ADUs without suddenly triggering making multifamily by right. So I just wanted to offer that clarification and that resource for the community should they wish to take advantage of it.
Okay, thank you. Alfred.
Through you, Jerry, to our building inspector. If he wants to duck and hide, I don't blame him. My understanding is for the habitable for low income, the bedroom has to be 100 square feet. I don't know if that's what section that's in. Is there any truth to that?
70 square feet, what, 70?
70 for a standard bedroom, but in a low income housing rental, I believe it's 100. Am I incorrect?
That's dual occupancy. Yeah.
The question to the building inspector.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. It's not in the building code. That would probably be in some affordability.
The reason I bring that up is I think some of these units are kind of small, the suggestion. The other question I had was, and I disagree with Jerry on this maybe I'm wrong, if you have an AADU, you wouldn't go back to the zoning board because now it becomes by right. So why would you go back to the zoning board to do away with the permit that's become legal without the zoning board? What's your interpretation
it's just a clarification, Alfred, on it's a clarification to pull that document. You can't pull it, but what you do is
expunge it.
Recertify the Board of Appeals would recertify that previous decision has become null and void. And so when someone's doing a title search that's not out there as a cloud, the cloud has now been, it's sort of like a mortgage on a piece of property. once you pay it off, the mortgage is taken off, or the mortgage was never taken off, but the bank signs off. It's the same thing with the Board of Appeals. They would sign off. It's sort of like, let's see if I can put it in your language. You get from
Discharge of a
the
lien.
Conservation Committee an order of conditions for the bulkhead. When you finish the order of conditions and they're satisfied, what do they give you?
They give you a sign, but my question is, it's going to be null and void after 3 years anyways if you don't fill out the paperwork. So it evaporates on its own potentially, can it? I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
No,
After
well,
2 years.
It could, Alfred, but it's still there as a flaw that at some point a good attorney would want to say, listen, get me a piece of paper that just clarifies the title. Just that,
All right.
that confirms the fact that it's by right. Don't
But I guess
assume.
It should show up on title search, yeah.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm asking that is some of the ones who have evaporated, who actually met the code at that time, would automatically come back into the picture if this was to pass, if they wish to, because now they don't have to go back to the zoning board.
Yeah,
That's not true, Alfred,
Why?
because now by right, they'd have to be in compliance with all Board of Health rules, and their septic wouldn't be, because all those things are all in violation anyhow, you know it. So
Well,
they'd still be in violation.
Well, I'm asking the enforcement officer, and I said he could hide if
Okay.
he wished, for my clarification. And my last question is, and he may not have looked at this bylaw close enough for this, but depending on what scenario I throw out there, because I think the Board of Selectmen may want to be looking at a cap on this. If you had a vacant 1 acre lot and you put an alternative septic system in, which has nothing to do with the building department, but Board of Health says I can put 5 bedrooms on that property. In this bylaw, can you tell me why I can't put 5 separate units on it if they're only 1 bedroom? And if you haven't researched it enough to do that, I don't have a problem with that either.
Well, I guess it would come down to building coverage and so forth, but no, you're right. There is a potential that there could be 5 individual units, and with a minimum size allowed of 200 square feet. I mean, then I don't.
You could build 1,100.
Yeah.
You could build 1,100 square foot units.
Yeah, stay under the 15% building coverage.
And
Yeah,
the
that's all the
1,200
criteria.
and the 1,200 square foot per unit.
Yeah. Maximum, right?
So that's the reason I'm asking this question is because the Board of Selectmen is promoting this, and I'm not so sure that what they're promoted shouldn't have a cap on it. I'm not opposed to this, but I think I'm opposed to the fact that automatically, and maybe nobody's going to do this, but if you take a 1 acre lot next to a bunch of people, you put 5 new units on it, I think that's going to change the character of that neighborhood.
Totally.
And I'm not so sure that that's going to happen, but I think that because of my concern in it, the Board of Selectmen may want to look at putting a cap on either the number of units per year or the number of units on a lot. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
On to that if you want.
I'm still within the void, Helen, because that's plain and simple. It can be done. You may say it's not going to be done, but it can be done. So that's all his point was.
So I want to be very clear, Jerry. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm saying that the way the bylaw is written, I believe it could happen, and I believe the Board of Selectmen may or may not have understood that, and may want to look at a cap on it. That's why I'm making that as a suggestion, I guess, since we don't have any actual say in the bylaw.
Right. And
That's part of the feedback to the Select Board for their consideration from.
Exactly.
So
That's been.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah. Yes, David.
So I'd like to also suggest, to be a little more specific, that the Select Board carefully consider the Town Council's suggestions and comments, starting with 6.21.2.3, okay? And starting there are 5 in red comments and suggestions. And I, for one person anyway, believe all 5 should be looked at carefully and considered by the select board for alteration of the proposed bylaw.
Okay, David, that was 6.21.2.3, 0.4,
Yep,
0.5,
yep,
6.23.3 procedure.
yep.
All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And were you also including 6.21.3.2?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Another question I had is 6.21.25. Seems to me the way I read that is contrary to what's been said, that once you have by right and you don't rent year round, you're gonna get penalized, but the opening line on 6.21.2.5 says a property owner may choose to cease to use an accessory dwelling unit by formally reporting its change in use to the agent designated by the town administrator to administer and monitor such units and altering it to meet the requirements of permitted use. So basically, you're saying you built it, you don't want to rent it anymore. And whatever is permitted use, you can change that back to a permitted use. In other words, you've already passed the 2 bedrooms. We allow by mass standard as many kitchens in a property as you so desire. The only thing I think the building inspector could do is say, take out the stove. So that's, I think, where we said, the planning board, and I said, I think I did it in the past, said, all right, you can now rent that unit as an Airbnb. You can now rent those bedrooms as a bed and breakfast. You can now rent that potentially as a seasonal use because there's no restriction on seasonal uses. And they don't have a stove, but they have an outside barbecue. So I'm not clear on that particular bylaw as written and the clarity and what the intent is for the enforcing agent who ends up to be the building inspector as to what hands you've tied, because indirectly, if that becomes a simple accessory dwelling, the bedrooms are legal, the structure is legal because it doesn't cover more than 15% of the lot. It's called something else, but it's now there. So can somebody answer what I'm missing?
Yeah,
Yep, Mike?
it's already an allowed use. You could have built it to begin with. So the lot restrictions, you have to bring it into what's an allowed use. So that means it's already allowed. It can't be used for anything that's not already an allowed use on your property. And if
Right.
we're gonna talk about hypotheticals, the hypothetical is that you can cover 15% of your lot coverage with a giant house and rent it out as a short-term rental to frat boys from Northeastern on a weekly or nightly basis. I mean, that's a hypothetical, but it's by right. You know, and it's like, we have to talk about the context of what's going on in our neighborhoods right now.
Right, but it was by special, and to the point is Alfred made with putting a number or a cap on the number of units allowed. To me, this is also a cap on why wasn't it a special permit? I mean,
Yeah.
the AADU was a special permit. And if this is by right, with absolutely no notification as to abutters, as to what somebody is doing that's increasing a single family residence to potentially 1 or 2 more year-round units.
Yep.
Without a notification. And I understand simplicity. I totally understand that it costs additional money to probably have an attorney go to a Board of Appeals and plead the case that we've met septic and we've met everything else. But have you really analyzed?
I have spent a lot of time analyzing this, and it comes down to this. You don't need to notify abutters to build a giant house on your property and do what you want with it. That's by right. And so we're in a housing crisis, and you have to look at the intent of the bylaw to create housing. When we're approaching maximum build out in the town, you have to compare the use of property with what's already allowed by right. And we are currently allowing people to use housing units at whatever maximum build out they want. That means up to 15% as short-term rental businesses, and they're covering our neighborhoods. And almost every neighborhood is majority short-term rental business. And when you look at that use and you compare that use, you have to look at that in comparison to, yes, it is possible that somebody may make 5 one-bedroom units. But I don't think personally, when you look at detriments, that's more detrimental than hollowing out a neighborhood and using it for short-term rental businesses at any maximum size building that you want. It happens to be that, we have a 15% lot coverage, and that means 85% of your lot has to be open space. Most people don't maximize their lot coverage if they have big lots because people value open space. We also have seasonal, we have non-resident homeowners that I don't think are going to be jumping at the bit to put year-round housing units all over their properties. So, the intent of the bylaw is to maximize any potential for year-round housing units. And to the extent that hypotheticals may happen, well, there's a lot of hypotheticals that can happen right now by right that I don't think your neighbors would like, and they don't have to go to a special permit. So you really have to look at it in context of what's already an allowed use. So yes, the select board understands what the bylaw allows. And in context, it really comes down to use, bedrooms, lot coverage, what's allowed on a property right now, and what the intent of the bylaw is, what we're trying to achieve here. And I mean, it's highly unlikely you're going to have people spending $1 million building separate structures to rent at market rate, because I'll tell you right now, in my experience with market rate, it's what people can afford. And I talked to someone today who has a AADU, and it's $11.50 a month for a small 1-bedroom studio. And I asked her, what would she charge if she wasn't getting the affordable housing price? She said probably 900 is what I would have thought I could charge. So the reality is that capital A affordable is not much different than market rate. My last housing rental that I had was 500 square feet with a wood stove. It was $850 a month. If it was actually ADU, it would have been a mandated price of around $11.50. So there's no inventory. So the intent of the bylaw is to increase the inventory of year-round housing, and that
I totally agree with you. It's the intent to create inventory. And
Yeah.
I totally agree with you that the intent is valid. I'm just suggesting certain things that if it wasn't a problem and you didn't think that people were going to build 5 of these units, then what would have hurt if you put a cap on it? And what would it have hurt if you put a special permit on it? It's just the way the planning board normally in the town of Wellfleet operates as far as special permit goes. You can't practically sneeze without a special permit. But that stuff, we can't change it. All we can do is come up with some ideas to help it get passed on town meeting floor, or or come back to the planning board to reanalyze it next time. That's all we can do. All right, as I stated,
Jerry,
as I
you've got
stated,
two, Jerry, you have two more people
I'm
with
I'm
hands
sorry
up.
at this, I'm sorry. At this point, I closed the public hearing. At this point, I also notified everyone that I've got two other things on this agenda that have to be done tonight. So it is now 9:15. I have a feeling that the right to farm is gonna go a little while. Hopefully, the High Toss Road will go fairly quickly. So I'm feeling at this point, unless the planning board tells me they want to just keep on trucking, that I may need to continue this public hearing, which has been closed to the public, until our next meeting on June 2nd.
Jerry,
How does, Beth,
Jerry, I only have another 15 minutes to be on Zoom.
okay, and what we've got, however, keep in mind the right to farm is a general bylaw that we can't change either. It's just an up and down. So I think that particular one I want to get to because I'm going to abstain from that vote. So I'd love to see 6 of you at least vote on it.
Jerry, I
And
got a question about waiting till our next meeting to vote.
Yes.
If we wait till the next meeting and then we vote, will that still show up at town meeting?
no, because the warrant's going to close probably, Mike, did you say the warrant's going to close tomorrow and go to
The
plan?
warrant's gonna close tomorrow, so if you want to make a recommendation on this warrant, on this article, you can vote now, or you can withhold it until town meeting, and it will be announced by the moderator. It's really up to the
No, it'll
planning.
be announced by me. Because it goes
Oh, yeah,
from the moderator to me. So yeah, David, he's absolutely right. That unless we make a decision, unless you come up and we decide to either recommend, not recommend, or no vote.
Right.
Not knowing what we're gonna throw in with the rest of this stuff to pass on for recommendations, you gotta do that tonight. If not, we can certainly do this, because it's in the warrant. It's guaranteed to be on town meeting floor, both articles. They have the right, at least the Board of Selectmen have the right to make changes, so long as, again, they're not substantial. No matter what we recommend, they can throw all the recommendations out and just do what they want. But we would make that, it would simply be an oral recommendation rather than an in writing on the warrant recommendation.
But we
I
could
don't-
still announce our vote at town, on the town meeting floor for the
Yeah.
very first time.
Yes.
Yes, you have to. We have to make a vote on town meeting
It might
floor.
be the first time unless we vote tonight, because we would decide, if we decide later, then we have to announce it on the floor.
Well, we would announce it at a public meeting on June 2nd if we finished it then, along with everything else we wanted to do as far as that goes. That I'm sure would be in the paper anyway, but come the 26th of June at the town meeting, it would be an oral presentation. Yes.
Part of what I'm going back to what Beth said earlier in my mind about the idea of seeing what changes, if any, the select board chooses to make in their, I mean, I'm actually ready to vote tonight, but I'm just thinking about an alternative if no one else wants to. Seeing what changes the select board makes and then discuss them, if they make any changes, but discuss any changes they make, and then have a vote and announce it on town meeting floor.
Well, by continuing, okay, if that's the wish, by continuing this to the June 2nd meeting, you accomplish that because they're gonna meet tomorrow. If they make any adjustment, they're gonna make it tomorrow, so it's written in the warrant. I'm assuming they're gonna
We wouldn't be
do
able to
some
see that.
changes. We then have those changes to discuss at our next meeting. The public won't have, but we will, the ability to discuss it. Did that answer your question?
Can I make that motion?
Yes, you may. Well, Olga, she's gonna make a motion, but
What is
Oh.
the procedure for preparing a report from the planning board? I don't want this to just get lost. We had a lot of ideas that came out.
to answer your question so we can move on, it can't get lost because I have to, as chair, or if you appoint somebody else, as chair, I have to make the motion and report from the hearing, a quick report as to what the discussion was and why the vote was made. So it gets vented on town meeting floor. And as to David's point, if you in fact write up a page and a half
Right.
report on the discussions that we have to, that can be given out as we enter town meeting that night.
Well, and I think that would be very important to do. I don't think that's going to get dropped over.
Okay. Beth, you were going to make a motion.
I move that we postpone our vote until we receive from the Board of Selectmen their final bylaw.
Okay. Any second?
I'll second.
Bonnie second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Tell me who's opposed. No one. Unanimous? David, I didn't see a hand. David, I lost you.
David Rowell.
Rowell,
Rowell.
thank you.
No, I'm not opposed.
Okay. Alfred?
I'm not opposed.
Okay, unanimous. Okay. Thank you all very much. We will continue the closed section of the public hearings on both articles until either the first meeting of June, or we may choose to put it to the following Wednesday. That's still in discussion later on. So moving on, I am going to recuse myself of the right to farm and turn it over to David to run. Remember that it is a general bylaw, not a zoning bylaw, and the Board of Selectmen is simply looking for whether or not we approve, disapprove, or take no action. Okay.
Jerry, before you recuse, or maybe you just want to, I spoke with town council today. I'm also engaged in aquaculture and agricultural activity. And I've also spoken to the ethics board. And because this bylaw is essentially a declaration of support, it has no teeth, there's no financial interest, and it doesn't supersede any existing bylaws, regulations, or rules or permitting processes involved in agriculture, that there is no conflict of interest in putting this forward. So it's up to you, but that's the opinion that I've received from town council.
I'll put it clearly as I can, Michael, and I mean no pun intended. But in so reading the bylaw, when alpacas are cited along with shellfish, it's apparent that some people will think I had a hand in this, and I didn't see it till it came. I didn't even know it was coming. And rather than create problems, and I've already said this to one of the other select persons, that rather than create a problem for the Board of Selectmen, rather than creating heartache for the planning board, we have 6 members, and I think it's far even at 5. I think it's a fairly easy issue, and I think for all parties concerned, it is better if I just step.
Sure. I just wanted to.
That's my reasoning behind it.
Okay, and Jerry and Michael, yeah, this is a question for Michael. I'd like you to stay on. I hope you're not going to leave.
No, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to leave.
No, because I'm going to ask you, I'd like you to speak to this article because it comes from the selectmen. And I think as a board, I don't think we're really familiar with it. You're probably more familiar with it.
Sure.
So if you'd like to give an introduction to it, that would be most helpful.
I'm going to have Karen put me into the waiting room. Okay.
Okay.
She'll call me when I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So Michael, if you would you kindly speak to this article if you would?
I would, yeah. So the purpose for the legislative purpose and intent of a right to farm bylaw is it comes from the state model bylaw. This is a bylaw that is very similar to the bylaws that were passed in Orleans, Dennis, Harwich, Falmouth, and I believe Nantucket, There's a total of 140 towns in Massachusetts to have local right to farm bylaws. This is different than the state right to farm bylaw. This bylaw has no teeth. Essentially, it puts people on notice. The purpose of it here is to emphasize the right to farm accorded to all citizens of the Commonwealth under Article 97. So that's already a right of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And all state statutes and regulations thereunder, including but not including to the Mass General laws that are listed. And it basically says, we, the citizens of Wellfleet, restate and republish these rights pursuant to the town's authority conferred by Article 89 of the Articles of Amendment of Massachusetts Constitution Home Rule Amendment. Basically, the bylaw encourages the pursuit of agriculture, promotes agricultural-based economic opportunities, and protects farmlands within the town by allowing agricultural uses and related activities to function with minimal conflict with the abutters and town agencies. There's some functions in the bylaw that sort of aid in that intent. Basically, the bylaw has no teeth. We do have a sort of right to farm.
Already, yeah.
It's encoded in our health regulations by one sentence. This puts it in the general bylaws using the model right to farm bylaw from the state. It puts people on notice. I mean, the reason these right to farm bylaws and agricultural commissions are created is when you have rural communities that are engaged in agriculture and aquaculture, in our instance, that there is a sort of, it puts people on notice that this is an agricultural town in the general bylaw. It doesn't supersede any of our permitting processes or rules or regulations. You can't do anything now that you couldn't do before once this bylaw is passed.
Because we don't really have anything like that in regards to zoning, so it would fall under the general bylaw. And
yeah,
so
it's not a zoning bylaw.
Yeah, correct. It's just general bylaw issue, yeah.
Yep, it's a general bylaw issue. They're pretty common throughout the state, especially in rural communities where they're having changes in demographics and shifting property values and issues around use. And so one of these things, and I hope this also passes, is an agricultural commission, which essentially would serve as a mediating body to try and avoid conflicts to escalate. And, that's not always possible. It's the intent, but
Hatfields and McCoys wouldn't exist? Is that what you're telling me?
That's not what I'm telling you at all. It just gives, it just adds a commission, which would have a role to make recommendations and try and mediate a dispute before it had to go through the processes of ZBA or health. We go to the health department first and get kicked back to the agricultural commission. And then they would be able to make recommendations, try and mediate so things don't escalate and, lawsuits happen. And it's not going to solve every problem, that's for sure, but it does put people on notice that agriculture is occurring here, and it's important to do that. That's all.
Now, does this strengthen or reaffirm? I know at one point in time, Wellfleet was considered a rural community.
Yes.
And this had impact with, I know a few people in town who were able to get FHA loans, farmer home loans. And would this reaffirm that and just keep that ability alive as opposed to an urban setting?
It would reaffirm our existence as a rural community in our general bylaws.
Good, so that would be a positive thing, is what you feel? Okay, yeah.
It not only really exists in our health code regulations when it comes to permitting livestock and.
Yeah, we do have that, yeah.
Yeah, it's just one sentence, but this is a little bit more.
Okay,
a little bit more.
so it's to a certain degree a housekeeping issue and fairly innocuous, and the selectmen didn't feel it was, yeah, it's not gonna hurt us, not gonna harm us, more or
David?
less.
It's a declaration of support. It has no teeth.
Okay. Yeah.
David, will
Okay.
you take a motion?
Helen,
Has everybody read the article?
Yeah.
Or at least reviewed it?
Helen,
Yes.
David,
There are two-
Helen has her hand up.
Yeah, Helen and Olga.
Okay. Oh, good. Helen, speak, please.
Unmute, Helen.
Helen.
You're on mute. Helen, you're on mute.
Yeah, well, it's good. You don't hear my cats meowing. I am, as we all know, or most of us, very, very supportive of farming.
Okay.
I feel that one of the cons about this, and I was the select board member who did not vote to recommend it, although I did vote to place it barely, just to get it before the people, right?
Okay, good enough. I want to
But
hear
I'm not
about it.
recommending it for a couple of reasons.
All right.
The first is it adds a layer of bureaucracy. And it can in no way help an applicant who feels like, what the hell, I want to do this. And the zoning bylaws or the Board of Health regulations are telling me I can't. Well, the Ag Commission can't change that. What they can do, and this is a pro for this, is they could educate and help an applicant who's aggrieved, by being rejected by a Board of Health or a zoning board of appeals, to understand that there are limits, even though the town is
Okay.
very supportive of farming. If you look at our regulations, Board of Health regulations and zoning bylaws, very
Yeah.
supportive.
We don't really have much on zoning on this, Helen, as far as
No,
I
but
can
they have a
see.
little bit.
Farming.
Believe me,
Little
I
bit,
dragged
yeah.
it all out and
Yeah.
sent it to the select board about a year ago. But anyway, David, where I'm going with this is, if it's an educating tool that some people may use, fine. Some people who are aggrieved will go to the Ag Commission. But I felt that the language in the way it's written would create an ambiguity, despite this last section that says, hey, this can't supersede any existing laws and regulations. That again and again, the word allowed is used. And I had tried to suggest that we added after the word allowed every time as permitted, by various regulations or bylaws.
So you feel as though it could create confusion more than helping anything?
If
Is that
you
what you're
read
getting at?
through it, yes, if you read through it, I feel that it could be misinterpreted. And I had hoped that it would be clarified, not changed in terms of content, but
Just
clarified
clarified.
so that if
yeah.
somebody read it, they'd get it.
Can I respond to that really quickly?
Wait, and I have one more thing to say, Mike, and then I'll be quiet because they haven't heard me. You have. And we had a, fruitful discussion on this.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you, David. There's some things in there that are repetitive. For example, there's a section that lists pesticides as being able to be used, and that section is right.
That's a little dicey.
Hold on, yes, and that section comes right after another section, I forget the letter, and we're not screen sharing, which I wish we were, that says you can use pest control, and unfortunately we all know you can use pesticides. The label is the law if you use them correctly, which they aren't usually used correctly.
Well, I like DDT. So.
Yeah, well, you
Go
just
ahead.
go ahead and put it on your breakfast cereal.
There you go.
What I'm saying here is I have problems with the language. I support the idea. I feel that we're already supportive of it, and it will add another layer of bureaucracy. Thank you.
Are you, Helen, can I ask this question? Just that section, is that what you're concerned with in respect to pesticides? Because that would raise my ire too, I would think.
Well, if we were screen sharing, you'd see it, because what it says basically is, hey, be forewarned, these things may be used. And it comes right after a better worded section that says pest control is allowed. And, you know, pest control, picking, slugs off the garden, you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, excuse me. Thank you, I'm done.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have to leave the meeting, David. I just want to let you know I'm leaving.
Okay.
Jerry, so I'm not going to vote on this.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I
Yep.
just want to point out that when we went through this process, we deleted pesticides from that, and I don't know why
It's
did
still
not-
in there.
Well, it should have been deleted, so that will have to be deleted. We voted on it being deleted.
Yeah,
so-
Mike, I've got it in my copy, so
Yeah,
it's the one I
should
have.
not
So
be in there, and it shouldn't be in the warrant either. That word was deleted, and we noted that on our. I don't know if Ryan's still on here, but he would note that too. The fact of the matter is that we have no control over the use of pesticides, and this doesn't allow anything that's not already used. So I do agree that well, it should be deleted, but it was deleted by the select board and should not be in there.
Okay.
The other issue.
But I'll agree with you. We don't really have a lot of control over that, unfortunately.
But we
So,
don't. It's allowed. It's
Yeah.
allowed, but we didn't want to. During that discussion we didn't want to put the language in there because it doesn't need to be, and so we're
yeah,
not.
and it would artificially promote it when that's not the case.
So that is essentially a typo because we approved it as amended, and that somehow got missed. But that was a long conversation that we did have. Well, it wasn't that long. It was a 5-0.
It was noted.
It was noted and amended. So that will come out. I'll make sure that gets out of there. Other than that, this bylaw is based on the model state bylaw, and Helen did make some edits to it, but in a lot of it wound up, in my opinion, redundant because everything in here is implicit that this does not change any rules or regulations, that everything does have to be permitted.
Yeah,
So-
hence your statement, it's largely toothless.
Yes, it's to add it in every sentence didn't make sense. So that's why we didn't go through and adopt the redundancies that Helen and also she had changed some of the state's language in the disclosure notifications, other things. So I don't want to get into details about it, but in essence, this was voted for at one point by the board to approve this as amended, and then additional edits were made and not accepted. That's all. But this bylaw is essentially the same bylaw that's been passed all over the Outer Cape, and it's you know.
So
it's
you
based
feel
on-
if we took, Mike, if we took a vote on this and passed it with that deletion of pesticides, that would
that's
probably
already-
reflect.
That's already
Yeah.
deleted in our minutes in the amended document. It is.
Okay, so that would probably show up in the corrected version of that nature.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Okay.
the only way that there's an ag commission I don't understand this idea that it adds bureaucracy, because basically if there's a grievance, rather than throw it all at the Board of Health, the Board of Health can kick it to the ag commission to come up with some recommendations so that, you know, it takes some weight off the health agent and the Board of Health to get recommendations from the ag commission. They have to do it within agreed upon time with the Board of Health. So it's not like it's going to delay things that much. And it can avoid some potential conflicts by, you know, having people who are engaged in agriculture on an agricultural commission and some other people also. It's not just all agricultural people. Go and look and meet with the people and inspect the area and come up with recommendations for the Board of Health in the event that there's an grievance. So that's not part of this. That it's mentioned in Ag Commission. An Ag Commission would have to be adopted and passed in order for that to occur. But it's not a huge Helen's making it out to be this huge bureaucratical addition to what we already have. In fact, it takes a little bit of the weight off of the boards under these grievances when somebody complains, you know.
Okay.
They can't solve every problem, but you know.
David?
Okay, David, yeah, go ahead. David Fox, yeah.
I just wanted to say, I think this is a clear document. It's only 4 pages. the very last clause about the relationship to existing bylaws is very clear. It's a responsibility of a thinking person to read the entire document. Theoretically, somebody could get confused about anything, but to me, this is not confusing. It's a statement. It says, and the issue of bureaucracy, I think that's a little bit of another hypothetical that we've been doing a lot of talking about on the planning board. But
Yeah.
this is worth supporting and taking a vote on.
Okay.
I have a.
How's the board feel about making that one minor amendment, perhaps at Mike's suggestion, to drop the word pesticide there and take a vote on it?
Now, Olga had a comment, David.
Yeah.
Olga, okay. Olga, go ahead.
The first time Mike mentioned agricultural commission, I was looking and looking, where is it? Where is it? At the very end, resolution of disputes, paragraph 5A, there is an agricultural advisory council. And I guess what Mike was saying is that'll be a bureaucratic task.
Or its
Somebody
agent.
has to.
Yes.
And I'd like, maybe there could be a little more in this about who's on it.
Oh,
and-
so that's a separate article. And if the article
there
doesn't
is one.
pass, there's a separate article. If that article doesn't pass, then that just becomes a moot point if we don't have one. And things would go through regular channels. All these articles are passed with, all these articles are placed on every warrant I've ever seen with an ag commission as well. The ones that I've looked at, I haven't looked at all of them, but it's most common to have right to farm and an agricultural commission together because they serve hand in hand in the intent of the right to farm bylaw. So that is spelled out, and I have just amended that, and I'm going to bring it back to the board because there was some uncomfort with what was discussed last time. I think I've reached a point that I think would be agreeable to the select board, but I can't speak for them. And so we're just going to bring that back up on Thursday. I've submitted the language to Harry so that it's clear to the voters exactly what they're voting on for the Ag Commission. I think that's important. And
Okay.
yeah.
Good. Well,
David?
thank you. Yeah.
David, Helen has her hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Helen has her hand.
Yeah, I'm just
Release
referring,
Helen, please.
thank you.
Yeah.
So referring to what Olga just said, Olga, I think you're looking at, for some reason, a draft that got changed since the draft that you got.
That's what we have, Helen, no. That's,
Yeah,
that's
no,
our-
no,
that's-
I know.
That
So
was
the
a typo that
advisor,
Harry
hold
fixed.
on. I'm talking. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We do this. The reference to the agricultural advisory, whatever.
Council.
Yeah, council, that was taken out because the words that should be in there are actually agricultural commission. That was one of the things that happens when you copy and paste from other people's bylaws. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
So the question is, do we vote on something that has two changes that are going to be made? One about pesticides, or were made, but we don't have it in front of us.
David, they've actually been, the pesticide thing has not been changed, but I can guarantee you that the select board voted to change that, and it's in the minutes, and it's considered, I would consider that a typo at this point. Same with agricultural commission. In our warrant right now, it says agricultural commission, not advisory council.
Okay.
So those two things have been changed. Well, I don't know if pesticide's been changed in the warrant. It might not have been. I'll make sure Harry changes it, but those are incidental typos.
Is the board comfortable taking that on a vote of faith that those things have been changed and vote on this general bylaw?
I have my hand up. Just one thing. I saw the pesticides thing and I thought, well, maybe it should just read pesticides that do not negatively impact the environment, especially of abutters properties. I mean,
that's a gray area, Olga, I
We
think.
just
'cause it's
decided to remove it already. We've already decided to remove it, the word
Yeah.
pesticides, because we can't actually regulate pesticides. It's illegal
Yes.
for us to do that. So
Okay.
we don't want to encourage it, so we just removed the word.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
Board satisfied with that? The word will be removed and what we'll be voting on is the bulk of the text that's presented before us?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we're going to vote for it, David, we should vote for that as being our consideration for voting for it. Those two things should be in our vote.
Okay, then we will vote with those changes made, the deletion of pesticide and the correction to the advisory council, I believe.
I'll make that. I will make that motion. That's how we are going to approve it, if that's what the vote is. And then if they don't do that, we covered ourselves.
Okay, so if you want to make that motion then, Alfred, with
I
those
just did.
changes? Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did I hear a unanimous 5? Is that right? Are we reduced to 5 now? Because
Jerry's not here and.
Beth is
Yep,
not
yep.
here.
Okay, so passes 5-0.
I think
Okay, welcome back, Mr. Parent, please.
One, two.
He's coming.
He's coming.
There he is. He's on.
Jerry,
Yep.
There he is.
we invaded Truro.
Oh, David.
I did it.
I should have known letting you alone at almost 10 o'clock at night is not good.
Not a good idea, Jerry.
Oh, congratulations. All right. It appears that we have lost almost everybody but Karen, who's still in the chat room?
There's 18 people.
Well, why do I have not?
Oh, one more thing, Jerry.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Mike if he's still there.
I only see, now I only see David Mead.
Wow.
They're
I know how to
all
clean
here.
the house, huh?
No, there's 18 people.
Oh, I
And
got it.
Michael's still there.
Okay.
Michael's still there.
No, I'm back. I, for some reason, hit the wrong key. Okay, discussion on a request from the Board of Selectmen for us to make a recommendation on the taking of High Toss Road. Everybody understand this?
I would defer to Carol Ridley if I were you, just to present on that. She's the project manager. I don't want to say the wrong word, but well, Carol, I'm not going to slight you in the bit at all, but it's 10 minutes and it's 10 minutes to 10. So the first question I'm going to ask, do board members have any real problems with this particular request? Bonnie, you got any problems?
It's just, I mean, what I understood is it's just a map. It's a map that shows what is going to have to happen to High Toss Road, right? In order to do the
David
Herring
Mead?
River restoration.
David
Yeah.
Mead?
Yeah.
No, I'm okay.
Olga?
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
All right, so I'm gonna tell you what, from what you just heard, from who we have, David Rao, you got any problems?
No, none.
Alfred?
No, I don't think we have much on it anyways, Jerry.
I don't either. So I'm gonna tell you what, based on the fact that you know you have the vote right now, and you have waded through all of this.
Yeah.
You're a gutsy person. I don't think there's any problem, and I think the vote's going to be taken real quickly. But with all due respect, because you have been waiting, do you want to make a very quick presentation?
Well, good evening, everyone. Carol Ridley here. No, I mean, if the planning board feels like you understand the issue and have no questions, I mean, we're here to answer any questions you may have. I think the key thing is, I think the select board in making the referral requested that you provide your report to them by, I believe it's tomorrow, because they're taking the matter up on Tuesday. So,
Yeah, Yeah, they always leave us enough time, Carol. You know, it's just-
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I need to take as many shots at a planning board meeting as I can with the selectmen because they keep me on a short leash in front of them. I'm assuming just very quickly that it is a necessity for the town of Wellfleet to own this road to make this project continue to go forward.
Correct.
Is that the gist of it?
It is a requirement of several of our potential funders that the town be able to demonstrate its control of the road in order to do the work that's proposed. Correct.
Okay, and,
Yeah.
and I do understand that part of it will be graded up, but part of it will also, the grade will remain the same.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so the layout plan you have does not actually show the proposed work. It just shows the layout of the road.
Right.
Right, so you're not asked to approve the work that's proposed, but just the acceptance of the layout so that the work can occur.
And I must say, I'm very familiar with the road because I had a subdivision that came down to it, so I know it's been laid out, defined, and it's in the best interest. Okay, and not to cut anybody short, but basically, based on the fact I think I know where this board is gonna go at this point, let's just keep on going. So is there an emotion or recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they make the taking of High Toss Bridge Road? Nobody want to make that motion?
I'll make it.
Just a
Thank you, Alfred.
clarification, it's High Toss
Yeah,
Road.
High
Is that-
Toss Road.
Yeah,
You'll make it?
I made the motion.
I'll
I'll make the
second.
motion to take the layout,
It's
High
laid out and
Toss Bridge.
defined.
High Toss Road, as
It's-
defined.
Yeah, it's a new layout and defined, is that correct?
It's a layout and defined way, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any
Okay.
second?
Second.
Anything that I'm missing in that, Carol, that you need?
nope, I think that does it.
Mike, anything do I need to add to that? Is that?
No, we just need to accept the layout so that we can
Okay.
send
So
it
it's been-
for it and send it to the butters, I
Yeah.
guess.
So it's been moved and seconded for the selectmen to make a taking of High Toss Road as laid out and defined on the map. Anyone opposed? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All right,
Unanimous. I think that's vote of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6.
Okay?
Beth seems to be here, but maybe not.
No, that,
No, she
Beth
left.
has left the building.
she
She's
left
gone
the
with
building.
Elvis.
She's on
gone.
she's on a Zoom meeting with,
Oh, but it shows her.
for some
Her
reason, I
square.
don't know why, but
I don't see.
Karen, do you have anything? I see it. Karen, do you have any reason to think that Beth is still with us?
No, she's not. She's not
I
there.
hope she's still with us, but I know she's not here. Okay,
No,
Yes,
she's not here.
all right, thank you. Yes, Karen.
Yes, I just, so I think just procedurally, and this may be your practice anyway, but just a question, would the planning board actually be transmitting its report to the select board so that they will have that for their vote on Tuesday?
Well, I'm gonna try and do better than that because it's going on the warrant tomorrow. It's going out, so I'm going to instruct Karen to formally notify the Board of Selectmen and the TA that the vote was unanimous 6-0 for the town to make that taking.
Perfect, thank you.
That should be sufficient for the report, and I think that's all they need.
That's all we need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You got it, and hopefully Karen will have it out after she gets a little bit of sleep in tomorrow morning. Get it out to you tomorrow, okay?
Very good, thank you so much.
Sorry I couldn't get you ahead of all of this, but
That's the way it works.
the way it works,
Yeah.
okay? That's all set. David Mead, this was on the agenda because the subcommittee on the planning ADU article. I don't think we'll need a subcommittee. I think we can handle this on the 2nd or the 9th of June, whatever our next meeting is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna go by that.
Could somebody write a draft and submit it with the meeting agenda for the next meeting?
Well, I think out of the way the motion was made to move it after we see, I think we've got to discuss it, but I think we can put it together as a board at the next meeting. Do you want somebody to try and take a stab at it before then without having?
I would ask David if he doesn't want to do it, fine.
We don't know what the select board's going to do with the bylaw, though.
But we still
Correct.
have our point of view about incentives,
Yeah,
about
yeah.
enforcement. If you want to start something, I would appreciate that.
I could do that. Sure.
We could send you tomorrow night. We will be doing anything that we can do on that bylaw, and we can have Rebecca send you over the amended, any amendments that we make.
All right.
Okay, Mike, would you do me a favor and just make sure, because she knows it, would you have Rebecca send that over to, she'll send it through the proper channels to Karen, and Karen will get it out to all of the members. And then David,
Yeah.
you can start on it. Good.
Yeah, whatever we decide to do with the language tomorrow, that'll be it. It's going in the warrant. I mean, and then you guys can make your recommendations based on.
So what I'll do is I'll take a crack at it and get it to you, Jerry, for distribution to the planning board, and do it, let's see, in a timely way, I guess I should, so that that draft can be looked at by the members before the next meeting.
And if you want to, David, give me a holler.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can maybe brainstorm it.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Helen. Yeah. Helen, you're muted. Can't hear.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Two things. I went through the document with the comments from town council and addressed them. And this is a document just coming from me that you'll all get tomorrow. I sent it to Karen and asked her to share it with you. And I did, I also sent it to the select board, obviously, and Rebecca. And I'm going to bring up one possible amendment that is actually doesn't change the content. It just makes it clear, more clear. Better.
Okay, so just so, and I know.
It's just coming from me. What you'll get tomorrow is just coming from me. Then you're going to get from the select board what we as a group decide to do.
We'll get both of those tomorrow, though.
Okay.
Well,
So
Karen,
that's coming-
through you, Karen, did you receive that? And will you be able to share it with the group, please? Karen?
Yes, I hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's coming from you as an individual.
And I put a little cover note. It's very clear. And
Okay.
it's, also the select board is getting it and we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. 10 o'clock. Anybody want to move the minutes to the next meeting, or you want to take the minutes now?
Next meeting.
Okay. Since we're doing that, I'll let the members chew on this until the next meeting. Karen, I knew it was a new secretary, but the planning board goes up and down on minutes. And by mass law, the only thing we really have to do on minutes is have a motion on who made it, who seconded it, and the vote. That's the minimum we have to have. Going into the elaborate minutes of practically a paragraph on what everybody said during meetings really is overkill. You just got to get
awesome.
Huh?
It's awesome. I love it.
You love to be quoted, David.
I do.
It's kind of overkill. So I think the board should think about maybe uniformly giving her a little bit of direction as a board on the next meeting as to how elaborate or we want to make these, because they seem to be getting really too long and too elaborate, and they don't need to be. That's why we have recordings and that's why we have tapes. Olga?
I appreciate the depth that she was gone into myself. But I recently took an open meeting law refresher, and it seemed to imply that you must write up substantive discussions, not just this vote was taken or something was discussed at great length, which always annoyed me. I mean, what was discussed? So I appreciate
No,
what
I'm
you've
saying
done.
that was
Maybe
the minimum. If you look back at minutes when Rebecca did it and when the previous, you will see there's still about a page or page and a quarter. But, you know, everything that was said in elaboration does not need to be. Yes, the gist of what was said needs to be done. And we like that, but we don't need a narrative either. So think about it, think about what you want, and we'll discuss it. All right.
Hey, Jerry, I'm leaving the meeting and I just wanted to thank the planning board for the time they put in tonight and in the other meeting. And I appreciate the diligence that you're putting forward on the issue. So,
all right, good luck tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys. All right. The other one correspondence was simply a notice from a special permit granted from Eastham, and the fact that the Division of Fishery and Wildlife was remapping slightly, a couple of changes in MESA mapping for 2000.
Why did we get the Eastham one, Jerry?
Yeah.
They occasionally will do that. Truro will do it occasionally. It's not consistent by any means. Maybe they thought it was interesting that we should read. I don't know. But you got it in your packet.
Well, no, I'm just curious because that goes to a butter notification. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it because the lot and concern is right on the border. And is that why?
That could be. That could very well be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Regional communication.
What's it?
Let's see. Does anybody, the next meeting we have scheduled as the 1st and 3rd would be the 2nd of June. And then again, the 4th would be the 14th. I mean, I'm sorry, of 16th.
And those are live meetings, aren't they, Jerry?
Yeah, and that's going to leave us 2 weeks before July. And remember, it's consistent with the planning board that we only meet once in July and once in August. I'm assuming, Alfred, you want to continue that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm only one member. I mean, if you guys want to have meetings, that's fine. You just won't hear from me.
So do I, because that time of year, I'm just out straight as well. So.
Hey, Jerry, don't forget Memorial Day. You got a holiday on Monday.
Monday's okay. So I'm thinking that we change the next 2 meetings to the 9th and then the 23rd. And that way we can have about 3 weeks to the middle of July, middle of August, and then get back in shortly thereafter into September and start again.
That won't create any problems for us with town meeting?
No.
We'll still
If we
have-
meet on the 23rd, we're meeting 3 days ahead. So it gives us a time, if anything, where I don't expect we're going to be throwing any more curves, but just in case, at least we're meeting right there before it. So it kind of works out pretty well, David.
And that'll give plenty of time to get the information, of course, from Helen and the select board, and you and I can talk some.
Yeah.
And I'll do the draft, and I'll get that to back out as soon as I can so that we can discuss it on the 9th.
Okay, so unless something happens, and I would certainly poll you otherwise through Karen, we'll kind of go with that 9th unless somebody had a major problem. Okay? Members, thank you again for your patience, and I know this was a long night, but I think we're seeing the forest through the trees here, and we'll come up with something for the town meeting and see what we can do to get a good report out to them, okay?
Yep.
So with that said, thank you all again, and have a good night.
Yeah. What's
And I
that?
see Helen's still there. Thank you, Helen.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Karen.